Missiles have been the difference maker for Russia in the Ukraine war. They're the one weapon that Russia seems to have in abundance, while Ukraine has to scrape and claw to get missiles, and has to be very careful about how it uses the ones it has. Any poorly chosen target could lead to a missile getting shot out of the skies by Russian air defenses, wasting an expensive weapon. But not anymore. A game changer has just landed on the Ukraine war battlefield. Ukraine has fooled Vladimir Putin by introducing a clever new missile that will leave Russians chasing ghosts in the sky. And best of all, the new missile is American-made and compatible with Ukraine's Soviet-era aerial platforms. That missile is the ADM-160 MALD. On August 23rd, United 24 media reported that Ukraine's Su-27 fighter jets are now being equipped with the American-made ADM-160 MALD decoy missiles. This move marks the first time that these Soviet-era aerial platforms have been used to launch these missiles, which are unlike anything that Ukraine has in its arsenal. The word decoy gives you a clue. Unlike a conventional missile, a MALD isn't designed to unleash explosive fury onto a target. It exists to be shot out of the skies, or better yet, to force opposing air defenses to misfire, creating gaps that other missiles and drones can exploit. Think of them like aerial armor for Ukraine's valuable Storm Shadow and ATACMS long-range missiles. The MALD distracts so that those missiles can hit their targets. This isn't conjecture either. The Ukrainian Air Force has published a video on YouTube showcasing its MALD missiles installed onto its Su-27s. Better yet, the missiles are already combat-proven, as one of the pilots interviewed during the video explains. "Today I launched ADM-160 MALD missiles," the pilot says. "These missiles are designed to bear the main blow of the air defense, to place obstacles." That's an interesting way of putting it. The MALD missiles do indeed act like obstacles in the skies, confusing air defenses to the point where those defenses fire on MALD rather than the missiles that can actually do real damage. The pilot continues, adding, "This missile is a decoy for air defense systems. At the same time, at another airfield, our comrades are programming Storm Shadow or Scalp missiles to strike the enemy." That quote gives us an idea of the layered and cooperative approach that Ukraine is now going to be able to take with its missile strikes. With MALD missiles available, it can send decoys toward a target, launched from its Su-27s, while Storm Shadow and other long-range missiles are fired, perhaps even from different air bases entirely, but more on that later in the video. In Militarny's report on the video, it points out that MALD isn't a new weapon for Ukraine. These missiles have been used plenty of times before, dating as far back as 2023. It also notes that debris from one of these missiles was found following a Ukrainian strike against Luhansk in May of that year, showcasing that Ukraine knew exactly how to use them. By May of 2024, it was also revealed that Ukraine was able to strap its MALD missiles to its MiG-29 fighter jets. Now it's the Su-27's turn. Back in February 2023, Forbes reported that Ukraine may have up to 50 Su-27s in its aerial fleet, though it added that it's hard to determine the true number due to the war. Fast forward to today, and Ukraine has likely lost some of those aircraft. However, it's safe to assume that Ukraine still has several dozen of its Su-27s left, meaning this new integration of the MALD into that aerial platform just made Ukraine's air force more dangerous than ever before. But how did Ukraine manage to make this US-made missile compatible with its Su-27s? United 24 provides the details. The Su-27 integration appears to follow a similar path, with adjustments made primarily to the pylons, the outlet says when comparing this latest MALD integration to what Ukraine had previously achieved with its MiG-29s. Analysts note that Ukrainian engineers have adapted American MAU-50 or MAU-12 ejector racks, normally used on US platforms like the A-10, F-15 and F-16, for Soviet-designed aircraft. Those adaptations come with some limitations due to the age and size of the Su-27s Ukraine is now using to launch MALD missiles at Russia. United 24 notes that US bombers, such as the B-52, are capable of carrying up to 12 MALDs at once, meaning those bombers can rattle off plenty of decoys to ensure their other munitions strike their targets. Ukraine doesn't have that luxury. It's likely that an Su-27 will only be able to mount 2 MALD missiles per aircraft. That's due to the Su-27 serving as a multi-role fighter jet that needs to be capable of launching decoys, air-to-air missiles, and precision bombs all within a single mission. It's better to have 2 MALDs along with air-to-air missiles so the Su-27 can defend itself against an enemy fighter than it is to take away the air-to-air missiles, leaving the jet defenseless. Still, 2 MALDs are better than none. And if Ukraine is firing these decoy missiles from behind enemy lines, it may be able to use several Su-27s to unleash MALD bombardments against its prospective targets. So we know the MALD decoy is a missile that is designed to confuse rather than attack. However, it's when digging into the weapon's specifications that we start to see why Ukraine finds it so valuable that it's adapted its Su-27s to be compatible with MALD. Army Recognition provides some details about the MALD back in July 2024, not long after Ukraine first figured out how to strap it onto MiG-29s. It says that MALD stands for Miniature Air-Launched Decoy, and these missiles are equipped with an array of electronic countermeasures that make them far more dangerous than a simple decoy missile would traditionally be. These countermeasures allow the MALD to jam early warning systems and target acquisition radars once the missile is in range. That jamming can then be used to force the air defense systems linked to these detection systems to fire on the MALD, or presumably to prevent them from firing at all. United 24 adds that these electronic warfare payloads can also be programmed to simulate the radar signatures of specific aircraft and cruise missiles, which tricks Russia into thinking that it's actually scoring direct hits against Ukraine's more dangerous assets. It isn't. The MALD simply makes Russia's air defenses chase ghosts in the sky. All of these features are packed into a 9.3-foot and 99-pound package, which makes the MALD a surprisingly compact and lightweight missile given its capabilities. We just mentioned that the missile is able to simulate the radar signature of an aircraft. This small size means that it not only tricks air defenses into firing on that supposed aircraft, but the missile is also small enough for those air defenses to miss. Every miss buys valuable time for Ukraine's other weapons to break through toward their targets, as Russia's air defenses stay focused on the strange aircraft that they just can't seem to shoot out of the skies. It's a decently long-range missile too. In its own report on MALDs being attached to Su-27s, Defense Express says a MALD missile can travel between 280 and 560 miles, depending on the variant of the missile being used. Throw subsonic speeds into the mix, which the missile can maintain while using a combination of GPS and inertial navigation systems to stay on a pre-programmed route, and you get a missile that is among the most intelligent and far-reaching in Ukraine's arsenal. There's also a cost to consider. A single MALD missile was reported to cost $130,000 by the UK Defense Journal back in 2015. It's likely the cost has gone up since then, possibly reaching close to the $300,000 mark for some versions of the missile. But even then, this is a tiny fraction of the cost of the missiles that the MALD is designed to protect. For instance, a Storm Shadow cruise missile costs about $1 million. Al Jazeera said in November 2024, while an ATACMS missile is around $1.5 million. These cost disparities mean Ukraine is able to lose anywhere between 3 and 10 MALD missiles for every attacking missile it fires, and still receive a solid return on its investment. Add in the costs incurred by Russia, both in the depletion of its air defense ammunition and the results of those air defenses failing to stop Ukraine's more dangerous missiles from hitting their target, and the MALD is an absolute steal in an aerial warfare context. We'll leave the final word about the MALD's capabilities to Army recognition. In summary, the ADM-160 MALD's blend of deception capabilities, autonomous operation, cost-effectiveness, and versatility gives it a distinct edge over conventional missiles, making it an essential component of modern aerial warfare strategies. If that doesn't explain why it's such massive news that Ukraine can now strap these missiles to Su-27s, we don't know what will. It now has what you might consider a vital supporting weapon that makes its aerial strikes more effective than ever before. And that leads us nicely to the impact the MALD missiles Ukraine can now fire from its Su-27s will have on the Ukraine war. Tricking more of Russia's air defenses is the biggest, of course. We don't need to dig any deeper into how the MALD forces those air defenses to chase ghosts, as we've already discussed that in plenty of detail. However, it's worth considering what this capacity to trick air defenses means as the Ukraine war draws closer to completing its 4th year. The reality that Russia has to face right now is that its air defenses aren't in the best shape. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, Ukraine has managed to take out 1,211 of Russia's air defense platforms up to August 26th. Russia has never revealed just how many of these types of assets it has in its military, but losing over 1,200 of them has placed a severe dent in Russia's ability to defend its ground-based assets. Business Insider made that point a year ago in an article where it said that Russia's air defenses were already so stretched that it was being forced to pick and choose which of its assets to protect and which to leave unguarded. It also spoke to George Barros of the Institute for the Study of War, who said that many of Russia's air defenses have been moved close to the front lines to protect assets that are of immediate practical use in the invasion. If Ukraine can break through that line of air defenses that is inside its own country and installed in the border regions, Barros said, it will then be able to hit targets deeper inside Russia that are not adequately protected. Coming back to 2025, Russia's air defenses have degraded further, and Ukraine is already launching more deep strikes into Russian territory than ever before. A campaign of drone strikes against Russia's oil refineries has affected around 13% of the country's refining capacity, the Atlantic Council noted on August 21st. And not a day seems to go by without news of Ukraine hitting another target inside Russia or well beyond the front lines in occupied Ukraine. Now throw MALD missiles that can be launched from Su-27s into that mix. MALDs don't offer enough range to distract air defenses that Russia has set up deep within its own territory, but then they don't need to. As Barros points out, most of Russia's air defenses have been diverted to the front, meaning the targets inside Russia that Ukraine wants to hit are poorly defended at best. MALDs can instead be used for one of two purposes. They can either distract Russia's frontline air defenses long enough for Ukraine's drones to fly right past them and into Russia, essentially creating safe aerial corridors on a needs-must basis, or Ukraine could start using its MALDs as part of layered assaults involving other missiles and drones directly against those air defenses. The MALD distracts. Ukraine's other munitions hit the air defense unit firing on the MALD. No more air defense assets to worry about. Either way, Ukraine's MALDs allow it to create gaps in Russia's defenses that can be exploited for far more damaging strikes elsewhere. And speaking of strikes, that brings us to the second major impact that these missiles now being compatible with Su-27s will have. That new capability allows Ukraine to use a layered missile strategy. United 24 Media explains how this works, noting, "The Air Force video also provided rare insight into tactics. MALDs are launched almost simultaneously or just ahead of cruise missile strikes from other airfields, compelling Russian air defenses to fire interceptors at the decoys. It's almost like a layer of defense built into an offensive operation. The MALDs, as we've already mentioned, distract air defenses, allowing Ukraine's missiles and bombs to strike their targets. We've also touched on how Ukraine may be able to use this layered approach to enhance its deep strikes in Russia. Only there's a problem here that we've yet to cover. The US isn't allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles to strike inside Russian territory. That may come as a surprise to anybody who remembers comments made by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz back in May, when he said that Germany and Ukraine's other allies, including France, the UK, and the US, had lifted all of their restrictions on Ukraine's use of the long-range missiles they provide. However, an August 23rd report by the Wall Street Journal, or WSJ, reveals that is no longer the case, and may not have even been the case back when Merz said it. According to the WSJ, the US has been blocking Ukraine from using ATACMS missiles, along with intelligence that would enable it to use UK's Storm Shadow missiles inside Russia for several months. Unnamed officials who spoke under condition of anonymity say the US created an approval process for any launches in the spring, and Ukraine hasn't been able to get the okay for any launches since. Furthermore, any request Ukraine makes needs to be approved by US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, suggesting that even though there is a multifaceted approval process, the ultimate decision rests with one person. That's a problem for Ukraine if it wants to use the strategy of using MALDs to create safe aerial corridors for its US-made missiles into Russia. It doesn't affect Ukraine's domestically made drones, thankfully, but it does mean that Ukraine can't attack Russia with US-made missiles and bombs that pack a greater deal of firepower than those drones. However, Ukraine has a solution to that problem. As Business Insider reported in late August, Ukraine appears to have moved away from Western-made missiles and is instead using domestically produced missiles to strike against Russian targets. As of today, we are using our domestically produced long-range weapons, and to be honest, we haven't been discussing such matters with the US lately, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky recently said during a joint press conference with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Specifically, Business Insider reports Ukraine now has its long-range Neptune missiles that seem like they'll be the perfect partner for the MALD decoys its Su-27s can now fire. Then there's the Flamingo. Currently undergoing testing, this Ukrainian-made cruise missile is capable of carrying a warhead weighing more than 1 ton and, according to The Independent, has a range of 1,864 miles. That's long enough to strike almost any military target in central Russia, and even in many of the country's outskirt regions. The long-range layered approach is back on the table, and Ukraine doesn't need the US to pull it off. The Flamingo already appears to have entered mass production, with Zelensky claiming that Ukraine will have many more of them available by December this year. Combine that with the weaker, though still impressive, Neptune, and you get a country that will soon be able to use its MALD missiles to their full potential. That's devastating news for Russia, given the deep strike campaign we mentioned earlier in the video. Imagine the same sort of campaign, only with missiles that pack 10 times the explosive force of a long-range drone, and you get the picture. Russia's oil refineries won't just be going up in flames anymore. They'll be destroyed, and MALD missiles used in a layered approach alongside Neptunes and Flamingos will be responsible for that destruction. Impact will be an understatement. Speaking of which, the third and final impact that Ukraine's Su-27s being capable of launching MALDs will have lies in how this is yet another example of how Ukraine has adapted to the pressures it's faced during the war. Ukraine's ability to adapt was being hailed as far back as August 2022, when Engelsberg Ideas published an article in which it said that Ukraine's ability to adapt to changes on the battlefield has proven key to its survival. The resource points to several adaptations Ukraine made early on to prove its point, recognizing the poor nature of Russia's combined arms activity allows Ukraine to use anti-armor teams to push back the early Russian advance, for example. Ukraine's ability to secure military and financial aid was also a big adaptation, as was the country's transition away from Soviet-era weapons to the Western-provided and now Ukrainian-made weapons that it's using today. Ukraine's mass adoption of drones, both at the front and for deep strikes, is yet another example. Su-27s that can now fire MALDs are just the latest in a long line of adaptations. Here we see Ukraine figuring out how to take a Soviet-era platform that shouldn't be compatible with any Western munitions and turning it into a major threat to Russia's forces. As Chatham House's Joyce Hackney put it in March, Ukraine's success in this is not just about resilience or patriotism, but about the ability to adapt, decentralize, and leverage new technologies faster than its opponent. She argues that Ukraine has been so successful on the adaptation front that it should be used as a blueprint for the West, a provider of valuable lessons that Russia's current and future enemies need to learn to take on Putin's marauding forces. Ukraine has adapted again to increase the utility of its MALD missiles, and Russia should be terrified. It'll need to find some way to adapt to the new adaptation. If what we know about the state of Russia's air defenses after more than 3.5 years of the Ukraine war is anything to go by, it's not going to come up with an answer for the problem of Ukraine's Su-27 launched MALDs anytime soon. There's one more weapon that Ukraine could use alongside its MALD missiles to cause serious damage to Russia. That weapon is the ERAM, a US-made glide bomb that's faster, deadlier, and more accurate than anything Russia has ever produced. This new US weapon turns the entire Russian front into a kill zone. Find out more about it in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the latest weapons Ukraine is deploying against Russia in its fight for survival. And thank you, as always, for watching.